G'day there, Ben Fewtrell here from Max My Profit. Welcome to another live stream here on our Facebook page. Today is a very exciting day. I went to a workshop about, it must be 3 or 4 weeks ago now, in Sydney with Vanessa and her business partner, Kate, and it was a fantastic workshop on mindset and performance mindset and getting the best out of yourself from a performance point of view, and so you become more efficient and get more done. And so I asked Vanessa if she would be kind enough to join us for a Facebook Live to share some of her insights in, the area of psychology and mindset and succeeding in business. And here we are today. So Vanessa Bennett, thanks so much for joining us for today's live.
That's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And so the topic, as people would have seen, is the psychology and neuroscience of success mindset, which sounds almost difficult to understand. But I guess let's start by talking a bit about success mindset and what you mean by that, because I think that can help people.
Yeah, absolutely. It does sound a little bit scary from the outset. So I totally get that. So the idea of success mindset is really just to have that idea of seeing opportunities. Being in business is hard. Okay, so the whole idea is to have a success mindset, which is really 90% of people will often see obstacles in a situation. The top 10% of people with a success mindset will actually see those as being opportunities. So it's really having that can-do attitude, making sure that there's a lot of accountability as well. So rather than sort of leaving it in the hands of the gods and things like that, being able to say, no, I'm going to make this happen, and choosing what it is that you want to achieve, and then being able to go out and make that happen. And there's always going to be things and roadblocks and all that kind of thing that come up along the way, but it's how you have the energy and the mindset to deal with that.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? Now, for those of you that have just joined us, thanks for tuning in. I can see a few of you jumping in and watching live. This is a live stream. I do have my phone with me right here monitoring the chat box. If you've got a question at any time that you want to ask Vanessa as we go through this, please do. I've got Vanessa Bennett with me from Next Evolution Performance. And if you missed the very beginning, as I said, I went to a workshop with Vanessa about a month ago and was really impressed with the way that she works with people, with executives and business owners and professionals, entrepreneurs, to be able to get the best performance out of each individual person in their own way. So it was really good. If you do have a question, the other thing is if you do enjoy this, give it a thumbs up, hit the love button. We do love getting the like button. I'll just put a few thumbs up there now by clicking it. There we go. So you can see what they look like. You can participate in that. And like I said, if you've got any questions, please ask. So that's success mindset. So where does energy fit into all of this? I mean, you talk about people being able to cope, or they cope in different ways. Where does energy fit in?
Yeah, absolutely. So energy really is the centerpiece of performance. So, you cast your mind back to a time we've all tried to do it, work on something when we're really, really tired. And how did that work out? Probably not so well. All right. So things take longer. The mindset's not there. You start to get stressed. You start to get frustrated, all of these kind of things. So if you think about energy being right at the centerpiece of performance, now there's a few contributing factors that all go into having that energy. And we call it having energy mastery rather than just say basic time management. So really successful people will know how to manage their energy and master their energy rather than worrying about managing their time. So the way that it all fits in is that the mental side of things, so your ability to have a great mindset, is a massive contributor to your overall energy levels. So if you've got a really good mindset about something, you generally have more energy. If you've got more energy, you probably have a better mindset about things. And they're all related with other parts as well. We talk about it being physical, mental, and neural. And so the success mindset very much falls into this mental.
Yeah, so important. And it's one of the things I was really impressed with at the workshop that we did together as well. I'd never seen it broken down like that before, where rather than thinking about how you allot your time, where do you allot your energy? And I think, what was surprising was that so many people had the same realization, is that they were spending more energy than they probably had. How is that even possible?
Exactly. When people don't understand how, what gives them energy and what takes it away, it's really hard to manage it, right? So we did a really great deep dive on exploring where does it come from. And it's different for different people. So what energizes one person is going to be different to what energizes somebody else. And that's both inside of work and outside of work. And the same with the mindset. Something that stresses me out might not stress someone else out, and vice versa. So
Yes.
everyone's different. So it's about knowing how it works for you, but also the people that you work with, how they function as well.
Yeah. Now you've got over 20 years experience in doing this. So I'd love to hear from you what you think is the biggest drain that you see on business productivity and maybe, in respect to that whole mindset piece that we were talking about before, what do you think is the biggest drain that you see?
Absolutely. When it comes to the mindset space, I think the biggest drain really comes down to, a couple of things, but I think accountability is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
So this concept of being accountable for whatever it is that you said you were going to do. And often we find that business owners have a lot of accountability, because if you didn't have a lot of accountability, you probably wouldn't start a business. But it's having other people in the business that have also got that accountability. We've all seen the situation where it's like, oh, I didn't get this done because I was waiting on that person and that person didn't get that to me on time, and therefore I didn't get my bit done, so that's why I haven't done this bit. And it happens all the time. And so we need to make sure that we have ways of being able to coach that accountability and that real success mindset of, you know what, I said that I was going to do something by a certain time and I will deliver that, no excuses.
So do you think there's a lack of accountability in some businesses, and that's a big part of productivity problem?
Yeah, it really is. Accountability is definitely a big part of it, and also a little bit of negativity sometimes as well. So negativity spreads like a cancer.
Yeah.
And so we've all had those situations where we've worked with someone where it's just like, oh, just asking them how they are just saps the life out of me. So, we don't want to be in that situation, and it's just at work, it's the biggest cancer that we see. So, and they normally go hand in hand. So you don't find someone who's really positive and miraculously accountable outside of work who's not doing it inside of work, and vice versa. So if someone's not particularly positive and not particularly accountable, chances are that's streaming through all of their life.
Yeah, good chance of it, isn't there?
Yeah.
Now, if you've just joined us, I am monitoring the question box here on my phone. This is live. And Vanessa's more than happy to answer your questions. So if you get any questions, so let's say your performance isn't where you want it to be, or maybe your team's performance not where you want it to be, feel free to ask some questions as we go through this, because Vanessa's got some amazing insights in how to get your team performing better, and some, more than happy, I'm sure, to answer your questions. The other thing, if you are enjoying it, make sure you hit the like button or the love button. I'm doing that right now on my phone here. As you see those thumbs fly up over the screen, you can do the same thing. A lot of fun to do. So I guess, one of the things that we were talking about in that workshop that I did with you, which I thought was good, it was a good discussion going on around stress and how stress could be a good or a bad thing. Maybe tell us a little bit about your philosophy on stress and how that affects people in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great one. And you probably worked out from the workshop, Ben, that we could talk for days on stress. I'm going to need to keep this a little tighter today. But I guess the main thing is that, stress is not a bad thing. A little bit of neuroscience, not trying to freak anyone out too much, but the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for executive function, and it's responsible for being analytical and emotional regulation, that whole, I probably shouldn't say that whole filter situation, all of that gets done out of the prefrontal cortex. Now, the problem is the prefrontal cortex shares resources with another part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is your fight-flight response. The minute we feel overwhelmed, the minute we feel stressed about something, the minute we feel like we're not safe in any way, shape, or form, the amygdala can't tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a deadline. It just says, I'm not safe. And so once the amygdala jumps into action, the prefrontal cortex starts to lose its ability to do its job. So the irony is the time when you need it to function really well is a time when it doesn't. So small little design flaw in the human brain, but that's okay. So it's designed to get you away from danger, but not so good in the workplace situation. So stress is not a bad thing. And the thing is, you need a certain amount of stress. The prefrontal cortex is very, very fussy. It needs conditions to be just right, and stress is one of those. So if you have a situation where you don't have enough stress, well, it's going to take you 4 hours to do a half an hour job. Okay, so we need a certain amount of stress. So stress is good, okay, but it's when it gets too much that it starts to become paralyzing. okay, that's when it's not good. And so we see business owners happen because, I mean, let's face it, it can be quite lonely being a business owner. And so quite often, these kind of things just happen, and we just find that we've got so many stresses, and we don't necessarily always have someone to talk to about that. But it's also, our staff, because what stresses out business owners is probably a higher threshold than maybe what's stressing out staff. And so therefore, we need to be mindful of the fact that as business owners, that there's going to be other people who might get stressed at a slightly lower level. And the thing is with stress as well, it's also like a muscle, so you can train it. So, some people you'll look at and go, really? Are you stressed? And other people you'll look at and go, oh, they're not having a nervous breakdown. That's amazing. Just because the different thresholds are there. So stress is a really important one. So stress can be really good to get you in the performance zone, but stress can be debilitating if it goes over to that kind of paralyzing zone.
So how does someone control that in their environment? I mean, like you said, everyone's got a different level of resistance, or I suppose, I don't know what the right word is, that they would have a different judgment of what is stressful and what isn't.
Yeah.
How does someone go about, controlling how much stress they create in their day?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Ben. And, we do a lot of work around this kind of thing because it's so important for everyone to understand their own thresholds and to preferably understand the thresholds of those around them as well. I like to think, maybe I'm just deluded, but I like to think that no one wakes up in the morning thinking, how can I stress this person out today? So I don't think it's something that's done knowingly, but sometimes it can be done unknowingly. So in terms of being able to monitor that, the good thing is with it being like a muscle, we can train it. So if you have a certain experience and you go, actually, I made it through that. Oh, actually, that won't feel so bad next time that I do that. So when you get training at work and you try something new, all of a sudden it's not so stressful the next time. So trying new things and trying to stretch yourself a little bit is a great way to be able to do that. The other thing which I like to get people to do is this concept called a significance scale. And it's things like, often we treat things like it's bigger than Ben-Hur when it's really not. Okay, so if you think about a scale from 1 to 10 and just kind of think about what your own level of significance of certain events are on there, and you can make it very arbitrary. Like you could say, okay, number 1 is something like, I forgot the milk. Okay, not that big a deal for me. It might be a big deal for someone who's 2 hours away from the nearest shop. So that might be a 4 for them. A 10 for me would probably be losing my partner or ending up in a wheelchair. That kind of stuff. So what we need to do is to kind of think about, well, hang on, how big a deal is this thing that's stressing us in the scheme of things? And if we can get a little bit more of a handle on, actually, I'm not in a wheelchair, you know what, it's not that big a deal. So thinking about where that is. So often that's just a really great way for people to really help put things in perspective. And so when people can put things in perspective about where does it really sit in the scheme of things, we find that people have a greater ability to increase their tolerance to stress.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about the significance of something, I think there are people that sometimes create stress because they like, I don't know, maybe the attention it brings to them or something. How do people go about, or how would you say to manage somebody like that? Just say you have a team member that seems to always be stressed and they find everything seems to be a much higher significance than anybody else. What do you think would be a cause of that?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. There can be some belief systems that are around that as well. So often a lot of that actually kind of comes with some self-worth. A lot of people are they feel like if they're telling everyone how busy and stressed they are, then they're justifying their existence and, justifying their position. So there's a little bit that comes down with that. So often reframing and kind of saying, look, being overstressed is actually not that productive. It used to be seen as a bit more of a status symbol.
Yeah.
Now we can actually go, you know what, now what we know about neuroscience and psychology and performance and things like that, we need to reframe it. It's like, let's stop glorifying stress. Let's stop glorifying busy and say, no, let's actually glorify getting the job done with the least amount of wasted effort possible. So it's how do we reframe that? And once you start to reframe and tell people that, the idea is like we need to get through the most amount of output with the least amount of input, is essentially what we're aiming for. People start to reframe and start to view stress as not necessarily something that's just, sexy and glorified.
Yeah, because I think it can be seen as a badge of honor. I know you see some of this stuff online these days with these entrepreneurs that've got big followings, and they talk about the hustle. You got to hustle 18 hours a day. And I think to myself, the last thing I want to do is hustle 18 hours a day. I just don't have the energy to.
I know, right? Like, how exhausting would that be? So it's all about getting the results that you want, but making sure that you're doing it in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah, and we're all wired differently too. I mean, if I hustled 18 hours today, I'd have to sleep 18 hours tomorrow.
I think I would too. Absolutely.
So Andrew gives you 2 thumbs up. Let's stop glorifying stress. Good on you, Andrew.
Oh, great, Andrew. I love you already.
By the way, if you are just tuning into the live stream, or you're sitting there wondering, you've got a question, feel free to type it in. I am watching the chat box, and Vanessa's more than happy to answer your questions. When we talk about stress, right, you said before that stress is a good thing, but too much stress is counterproductive. And I know that different workplaces have done different things to try and help team members have areas where they can de-stress, like whether it's pool rooms or ping pong tables, PlayStations, etc. What's your thought on that? Is it good to have these breakout areas for people to be able to go and de-stress, or what do you think? What are people doing to help their teams reduce stress?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anything that involves flexibility is the main thing. When we can learn how to tap into how our own circadian rhythms work, and how our own energy levels can be mastered and managed. It's just having that flexibility. So for some people, it might just be working different hours. For some people, it might be their ability to shut themselves off and be able to really focus. Activity-based working areas, they're not necessarily all they're cracked up to be. So they can be good. There's definitely some benefits, but there's also some downsides, which if you don't teach people how to manage those, it can be very stressful for people. So we want to help people to sort of understand, well, what would make them less stressed. So, hey, if a ping pong table is going to help people, absolutely, all for it. If they've got a space that they can go and just kind of like really focus on something else, and especially if you've got people, depending on the line of the work as well, whether it's creative work or things like that. So I think having a workplace that's really good for the people who are going to use it that way, that's the main thing. But having the ability for people to collaborate when that makes sense to do so, but also not stress people out by, I can't find my desk, or, all that kind of thing as well. So some people actually get quite stressed when they don't have their desk that they can go to and their photos up and things like that. So it's really working with whoever you've got there and the kind of environment that you're looking at. Yeah. And hey, if ping pong tables work for you, go nuts.
Go nuts, hey? Now, talking about success mindset, I mean, and the importance of the psychology behind having a success mindset, do you think that, I would say, wouldn't you think that most business owners just have a success mindset? Isn't that why they've gone into business? Or do you think that they don't all have the right mindset?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You would definitely think that. And I certainly think that people who start their own businesses, they probably have it on average better than what most people do if they don't start their own business, because there's a certain amount of, it's full on, right? So you've got to have a certain amount of high expectations, and you've got to have a certain amount of optimism and positivity. You don't just, invest all this time and energy and capital into a business and go, I'll just see if this works. It might not work. It might. I'll just give it a crack. All right. So, we find that business owners are generally quite optimistic about all of that. But the thing is that things can happen in business and things can derail. And we speak to a lot of business owners who really they start falling out of love with their business. They started it because they wanted more flexibility. They started it for certain reasons. They wanted to do this. And next thing you know, it got really successful and it got really big and it's all started to go crazy. And next thing you know, they're like, I'm actually not enjoying what I'm doing anymore. I feel really stressed. And this was like the whole different reasons of what I started. So I think they've definitely got a certain level of mindset there. But when push comes to shove, let's face it, the trajectory for a business is not just straight up. It's more like this. So,
I wish it was.
Yeah, I know. It's nice if it is, but I think that's more the exception rather than the rule. So if we can help people to kind of go, you know what, there be ups and downs, and when you're taking bigger risks, and the bigger your business gets, and the more people that you've got relying on you, and that kind of thing, the stresses start to happen. And so often businesses grow to a point where the success mindset that was enough when you first started the business, not quite enough now for everything that's going on. So it's about being able to adjust. It's about being able to build it and basically adjust and adapt as you need it.
So it's interesting. You mentioned before people falling out of love with their business and maybe things not going to plan, so they get a little bit derailed or demotivated. And I think this can lead to some mental health issues sometimes for business owners. It doesn't get talked about a lot. How do you feel that a success mindset can help or hinder, or how does that fit in with success mindset? Do you find that people with success mindset are less likely to have those mental health issues? Or?
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's a great question, Ben. And this is a minefield, and it's so important because, the latest stats around mental health problems are frightening. It's like 50% of people who are currently working, if they haven't had a mental health problem, will at some point in time. Now, that's insane. That's really hard.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that the irony is that when you're dealing with high performers, a lot of high performers are the ones who start their own business because they've got all this to start with. They've got some great things. Then the pressures that they put on themselves become so great. And so quite often, high performers end up being quite prone to anxiety and depression, often because of the pressures they put on themselves. So they've got a certain level of special needs. So being a high performer, it's a great thing. It's also more prone to certain things as well. So there's a bit of that. So what we want to do is, and this applies to everyone really, is this concept of mental fitness. So we now know, let's think about physical fitness, okay? So we now know that if you want to avoid diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all of these kind of things, well, move, okay? Do your 10,000 steps, exercise, whatever it is that you need to do, but we got to move. We need to train our bodies physically to avoid physical illness. Now, the beauty of it is that with all the lovely research that's coming out of at the moment around neuroscience and psychology and how they intersect. So I'm currently doing my master's in this through King's College in London in the psychology and neuroscience of mental health because it's just such a massive area. What we're now finding is that there's so many ways that we can actually work on, I guess for want of a better word, we call it mental fitness. So just like physical fitness, some people are more prone genetically to be able to run. Some people are more prone genetically to want to sit on the couch, so it's different. So if you wanted to get, say, two people to run a marathon, imagine one could always run 10Ks, always, and the other's starting from sitting on the couch. Well, you've got a different starting point, okay? But you can still get the two of them to run the marathon. They'll just be in different times and it'll be a very different training plan. It's the same thing with mental fitness. So now what we're finding is that in terms of your predisposition to anxiety and depression, there is a genetic factor in there. But just because you have the genetic factor doesn't mean that you can't work on your mental fitness so that you can avoid those things. Okay? So what we want to get the message across now is just like that we can train our bodies physically to avoid physical illness, we can train our brains mentally to avoid mental illness. And it's something where it's like, you know what, the stats are so high that it's best to err on the side of caution that you'll probably have a problem unless you know how to avoid it. And the beauty of it is now we know how to avoid it. So we really want to get the message out there that we can help people to do that because it's a big issue for businesses, especially small businesses, whether it's the owners, whether it's the staff, it's a big problem. So we want to make sure that people now have the tools to be able to avoid that. And we're getting a lot of traction on that and we're getting a lot of great results, which is really nice to see because anyone who's ever suffered anxiety or depression at any particular point in time, it's just something that you had it once, you just want to avoid it like the plague. So, let's make sure you don't have a relapse and let's make sure you don't go there in the first place.
Yeah, so important. So what you're saying is like you said, if you're not a marathon runner, you can be trained to do a marathon. Yeah. So if you don't have a success mindset or it doesn't come naturally to you, what you're saying is you can learn what it takes or learn to adapt and get a success mindset.
Yeah, it's called neuroplasticity. And so the neuroscience of the angle is that the fact that, our brains are like a muscle and all the wiring that's formed there. And so the beauty of it is even if you're sort of, more not necessarily blessed with the first part of that optimism, success, mindset, resilience, all of that kind of thing, the good thing is with some mental training, you can build this muscle over here, which is, and this one starts to get less and less, and this one starts to get stronger. So you can build it. It's just like a muscle situation.
Yeah, you just got to read the book The Secret. Apparently, it's all in there.
Yeah.
I think they followed it up with a book called The Answer that said you've still got to do some work. You can't just meditate and get results. How are we going for time?
I might need to know a little bit more about neural pathways, but we can get you there.
Now, if you're here on the live stream, please feel free to ask questions. Vanessa's more than happy to answer your questions. We've still got sort of 5 or 6 minutes left, and I've got a few questions here written down, but I'm happy to pop your questions in if you've got any questions, because I know Vanessa would be more than happy to answer those for you. How important do you think, if from a mindset point of view, as a business owner, I've got to make sure I've got my mindset right, but how important is it for me to be a strong, show my leadership or have good leadership skills to lead the team as well down that same path?
Yeah, it's really, really important. And now that we know more about this idea around how you can lead a team, it's really important because now we know better, we need to do better. So 20 years ago, it was like that person has leadership skills or they don't. And leadership skills wasn't something that was sort of, we could really train it or anything like that. And why would you bother? Surely it doesn't make that much of a difference. But now we really know that it makes such a difference. So, and again, we see this with a lot of businesses is that they started the business and next thing you know, they've got this whole team of people and leadership skills didn't quite happen along the way. And then the business starts to suffer because of that. And so, if you want a culture of accountability, if you want a can-do culture, if you want everyone else in your team to have a mindset of success, then you need to make sure that you're exhibiting it yourself, and you also need to know that you know how to coach it with your team as well. So this is not something that just happens by osmosis, because our brains are wired for defense, they're not wired for success. So unless you know how to coach it, both in yourself and with other people, it's just not there naturally.
Yeah. Okay. So you really got to work hard on learning how to do it then.
Yeah.
So how do you get others in your team then to have just say you've got a team full of people and not everyone has a success mindset or a positive mindset. As a leader, how do you go about changing people's mindset? I mean, I'm imagining that'd be quite a tough thing to do.
A really tough thing to do. The important thing is and what we do with people that we coach is that we really help them create a language and to create a framework so that everyone understands what are characteristics that are to do with accountability and what are characteristics, attitudes, actions, and behaviours that are not accountable. And therefore, we give people a language so that they know how to talk about it, they know how to communicate it, and they know how to reward people when they do show those attitudes, actions, and behaviours. And they also know how to call people out when they're not showing those attitudes, actions, and behaviours. So we want to make sure that people have that language there. Once the language is there, half the work's done. But it also depends on making sure that we've got the right, for the characteristics of the leader. Some people are going to be more inclined to want to have those conversations. Some people less inclined. So we need to work out if they're not the right person in the business to do it, is there someone else who's going to take on that role? But someone in the business needs to do it. So it's really helping people to have a language. When you've got a common language, it becomes a lot easier.
And that really comes back to that leadership, doesn't it? So you've got to have that strong leadership to keep the message clear.
Absolutely. That's right.
Have you got some examples? I know that you've worked with a lot of teams over the years, not just in this, but also in fitness as well. Have you got some tangible examples of the benefits of this in business, of how this has helped a business by getting everyone on the same page with the success mindset?
Yeah, it's actually around, firstly, from a hiring process. Okay, so we can certainly help people with some questions and things like that to ask during interviews.
Yep.
You want to weed out if people have got a naturally negative disposition. If they do, it's like that you're just going to be having more troubles than it's worth. So as part of the interview process, and the good thing is social media makes this a whole lot easier now. If you jump onto someone's Facebook page and start talking to them and then
do a bit of stalking, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. If they're just ranting about everything that's negative and nothing that's positive, well, they're probably someone that you might want to stay away from. But once they come on board, then it's like you want to make sure that you're weeding them out. And the good thing is, there's actually online tests that you can do to test for optimism. So that's pretty awesome too. That makes it a lot easier. But when we have these things, and then it's got to be day one, I always say, and I used to do this when I was running a sales team. I used to work in financial services and I ran a high-performing sales team even during the global financial crisis. But anyone who joined the team, and I always say this to leaders now, part of the induction process, literally, day one, is to get them to know how to talk about it. Day one is to get them to know how to communicate it. And they know how to call people out when they're not showing those attitudes, actions, and behaviours. And then day two is to get them to know how to reward people when they do show those attitudes, actions, and behaviours. So it's really needs to be have a conversation about this and outline the attitudes, actions, and behaviours that are acceptable. And the other really good thing to do is to put that in the KPIs. You might want to call them KBIs, key behaviour indicators. Because quite often the people who are just doing enough to meet performance are the ones that can't catch them out on the negativity because you've got them there in writing. Whereas if you actually put key behaviour indicators for people, it's very easy to point to that and see that you're not doing that. And then you can have a performance conversation around that far more easily when it's systematized and you've got a language around it. Yeah,
so important, isn't it? So from what I'm hearing now, there may be some people that you're just not going to get there and they may have to go and join another team.
That's exactly right, yeah. We always they should be given opportunities to become more positive or opportunities to go elsewhere.
An opportunity to find a new direction, yeah. Well, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
They say move up or out. That's what you've got to do. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. There's no other questions or anything coming through on the live stream, and we are pretty much just out of time, but we will take any questions. If you have got a question, feel free to pop it into the question box. I've got my phone here monitoring it so I can see if you do ask a question. Make sure you hit the thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. I can see still quite a few of you are tuned into the live stream. So if you do have a question for Vanessa, now is the time. So we're going to wrap this up very shortly. Now we've got you coming along as our special guest speaker at our upcoming Business Acceleration Conference. I've got to say, I'm really excited about that.
Yes, I'm excited too.
Yeah. So that'll be the 19th of June here in Sydney in Homebush, and all our members get to come to that. But if you're not a member of one of our programs, you can come along as a VIP. We love to have extra people come along. It's a great planning day, but we're going to have Vanessa talking. What are you going to be covering off on the day, Vanessa?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the psychology and neuroscience of success mindset, and we're going to be going a little bit deeper on some of the things that we spoke about today. So you're going to understand a few of the foundations, and then also a few of the quick tips that you can take away and start to implement immediately into your business.
Awesome, fantastic. I can't wait, absolutely can't wait. So thanks so much for today. Is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't ask?
No, I think that's great.
We covered everything.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing everyone there. And if anyone wants to get in contact with us, I think you probably have our details. So feel free to share those around. And
so the team have just popped your details into the chat box. We do have a question just come in from Shad. Shad says, success is different for everyone, right? How important is it to know what success means to you?
It's so very important. Yes, you're absolutely right. That's a great comment, Chad, is that success is very different to everyone. And so that's why it's really important to define it and to start to have this conversation, and because it's really important that you want to work with people who are aligned with you. So if one person's definition of success is completely different to your definition of success, well, there's always going to be a disconnect there. It doesn't matter what yours is, so long as it's transparent and so long as you're surrounding yourself with people where success is important.
Yeah, so important, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So important. And let's just check the questions here. I think that's it. Thanks so much, Chad, for that question, by the way. I really appreciate you participating in the live stream. Now, if you're watching a replay of this live stream and you have a question after going through and watching to this point, feel free to pop it into the comment box below the video and we'll make sure that we get Vanessa to answer that question for you. I'm sure she'll be monitoring the chat after the live stream. Anyway, thanks so much for those of you that have stuck around and tuned in for the live stream today. I really appreciate it. And of course, once again, a big thank you to you, Vanessa, for joining us. Without people like you joining us and sharing your amazing knowledge, we wouldn't have these live stream sessions every week.
That's a pleasure, Ben. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. All right, so you're welcome, everybody. I have a couple of thank yous coming through in the chat box there. You're welcome, everybody. And I'm really looking forward to having you as our guest in June. The details to that event have also been popped into the chat box. So if you do want to find out more about that Business Acceleration Conference, you can look at the details there. Until next time, take care and stay profitable. Cheerio.